Ask her why her ring doesn't match the photo, Grace Whittaker said. And every glass in Il Vetro Nero stopped halfway to the toast. The 4-year-old stood beside the dessert cart, one finger pointing at Isabella Vane's diamond ring, the other hand holding a bent old photograph against her chest. Vittorio Caruso did not move. Isabella smiled, but her thumb slid over the inside of the band. She's confused, Serafina Bellandi said softly. Grace looked up and whispered, the ring in the picture is hurt. Hers isn't. 3 hours earlier, the glass room of Il Vetro Nero was still empty except for candle smoke, folded napkins, and the low clink of silver being checked twice. Clara Whittaker moved along the long table with the careful silence of someone who knew rich rooms did not forgive noise. Her black service dress was freshly pressed, but the cuffs were worn shiny from years of washing. Behind her, Grace sat on a small wooden chair near the dessert cart, swinging her scuffed Mary Jane shoes without letting them touch the tablecloth. Clara had told her 3 times not to touch anything. Grace obeyed. Mostly. She kept both hands in her lap, wrapped around the old photograph she had found that morning in the tin box under her mother's ribbon roll. The photograph had a cracked white border and one corner folded so many times it felt soft as cloth. In it, a woman Grace did not know stood near the same restaurant window, younger candles behind her, wearing a ring with a tiny dark mark on the stone, like a moon had been bitten from the edge. Grace had colored around that mark once with a pencil, not on the woman's face, not on her dress, only around the ring, because she thought someone should remember the little broken part. Clara saw the photograph in Grace's hands and froze for half a second. Not long enough for the servers to notice. Long enough for Grace to notice. Baby, Clara said too gently. Put that away. Grace looked down. Is the lady family? Clara reached for the picture, then stopped before taking it. Her eyes went toward the private doors at the end of the room, the ones only Mr. Caruso's people used. It's just old, she said. Some old things still matter, Grace answered, because Clara had once said that about a chipped teacup they could not afford to replace. Clara's mouth tightened, but before she could speak, the doors opened. Vittorio Caruso entered without raising his voice, and the room arranged itself around him. Men in dark suits straightened near the walls. A lawyer closed a leather folder. A waiter set down a tray too quickly, then steadied it with both hands. Vittorio wore a black tailored suit, his silver watch low on his wrist, his Caruso signet ring heavy on his right hand. He did not look cruel. That was what made him frightening. He looked like a man who had already decided how much silence each person in the room was allowed. Isabella Vane came in after him, pale dress, pearl earrings, perfect smile. Serafina Bellandi guided her with one hand at her back, murmuring about tradition, timing, elders, midnight. Romano De Luca appeared near the hallway carrying nothing, though Clara could have sworn the security camera light over the wine corridor blinked once as he passed. Grace did not understand midnight. She did not understand inheritance, family recognition, or why grown-ups smiled hardest when they were afraid. She only saw Isabella lift her hand to greet the room. She only saw the ring flash under the chandelier. And she only saw that the moon-shaped hurt was missing. Grace stared at the missing moon on Isabella's ring until the sparkle stopped looking pretty. It looked too clean, too awake, like a new button sewn onto an old coat and called history. Clara touched Grace's shoulder, not hard, but with the kind of fear that traveled through fingers before it reached words. Grace, she whispered, eyes down. The little girl lowered her chin, but she did not put the photograph away. Across the room, Serafina Bellandi watched the movement with a smile so polished it seemed practiced in a mirror. How charming, Serafina said, gliding closer to the dessert cart. Mr. Caruso, forgive the interruption. Children of the staff sometimes become attached to old things they find in kitchen drawers. Her voice was warm enough for the guests and cold enough for Clara. A few people at the table gave small polite laughs, the kind rich rooms used when they wanted cruelty to sound harmless. Clara stepped forward at once. I'm sorry, sir. She didn't mean anything by it. Her hand tightened around the edge of her apron. She's 4. She notices little things. Then perhaps she should notice where she belongs, Serafina replied, still smiling. The sentence landed softly, but Clara flinched as if it had been thrown. Vittorio Caruso did not look at Serafina. He looked at Grace. Not kindly, not cruelly, precisely. His eyes moved from the photograph in her hands to Isabella's ring, then to Isabella's face. Isabella had recovered by then. Her smile returned with a tender sadness that made her look almost wounded. Poor little thing, she said. She must be overwhelmed. All the candles, the music, the grown-up conversation. She bent slightly, pearl earrings catching the light. May I see the picture, sweetheart? I'll keep it safe so it doesn't get ruined. Grace took one small step backward. Her heel bumped the wheel of the dessert cart. The silver pastry tongs trembled with a tiny sound. Mama said not to give old things to people who don't know them, Grace said. Clara closed her eyes for half a second. Serafina's smile thinned. Isabella's hand stayed extended, patient and open, but her eyes were not on Grace's face. They were on the folded corner of the photograph, the corner where the bitten moon mark sat inside the ring. Vittorio saw that. He saw it the way men like him saw a hand reaching under a jacket, or a waiter stopping too long near a private door. He did not speak at first. He only lifted his champagne glass and set it down untouched. The sound was quiet. Everyone heard it. No one takes the picture from the child, he said, until I know why everyone wants it gone. The room changed temperature. Clara looked as though she might cry, but she did not. Grace looked up at Vittorio, confused by the word everyone, because in her mind she had only seen one person try to take it. Serafina gave a soft little laugh. Vittorio, please. The elders are waiting. This is an engagement toast, not a nursery investigation. Then it should survive a nursery question, he said. Isabella lowered her hand. Slowly, too slowly. Her thumb brushed the inside of her ring again, covering whatever was engraved there. Grace noticed because the thumb moved like a curtain. She hugged the photograph closer. The ordinary sounds of the restaurant tried to return. A fork placed beside a plate, ice settling in a bucket, the soft breath of the air system above the glass ceiling. For one brief moment it almost worked. A server replaced a candle that had burned unevenly. Clara reached for Grace's ribbon at her wrist and straightened it. A tiny motherly motion in the middle of a room that had forgotten they were people. Then Serafina turned her head toward the table and said, "Old photographs distort under yellow light. Anyone who has handled family archives knows that." Vittorio's eyes moved to her then. "I did not ask you about the light." Serafina's smile did not disappear. That was what made it worse. "Of course," she said. "I only meant to spare the child embarrassment." Grace looked at the photograph again, then at Isabella's ring. Her small voice came out softer this time, but clearer than before. "The picture isn't embarrassed." Vittorio leaned back in his chair, silent, and for the first time Isabella's perfect hand curled into a fist around the ring she claimed had nothing to hide. Isabella's fist relaxed the moment she realized Vittorio was watching it. The movement was graceful, almost nothing. Just a woman smoothing her fingers over a diamond ring, as if nerves had made her careless for 1 second. But Vittorio had lived long enough among liars to know that real calm did not arrive so perfectly on command. He reached for the old photograph without taking it from Grace. "May I?" he asked. The question was not soft, but it was careful, and that mattered to Clara. Grace looked at her mother first. Clara's face said no, but her eyes said the room had already become too dangerous for hiding. Grace slid the photograph across the table with both hands, keeping one fingertip on the bent corner as if she were helping it cross a street. Vittorio placed it beneath the nearest candle. The flame shivered against the glass walls and drew a small amber line across the woman in the picture. The ring on the woman's hand did not shine the way Isabella's did. It held light unevenly, catching it on one side and losing it on the other, because the stone leaned just slightly left. Grace leaned forward on her toes. "There," she whispered. "The moon." Her tiny finger stopped over a dark curve on the ring's edge, a little dent shaped like something had taken a bite from it. I drew around it before. See? Vittorio looked closer. There was a faint pencil circle on the white border near the woman's hand. Not on the ring itself, but beside it, the careful mark of a child who had wanted to remember without ruining the picture. The room grew quieter in a different way now. Not offended quiet, listening quiet. Serafina noticed it and moved at once. A sweet imagination, she said. Children see moons in soup, faces in wallpaper, monsters in shadows. We must not build family decisions on a pencil mark. No, Vittorio said. We build them on details people rush past. He turned his head toward Isabella. Your hand. Isabella blinked once. Excuse me? Put your hand beside the photograph. She obeyed because refusing would have been louder than agreeing. Her wrist floated over the tablecloth, pale and delicate, the diamond bright under the chandelier. Grace frowned. Not in anger, in concentration. She looked from the picture to Isabella's ring and back again. Lips parted slightly. Hers sits in the middle, she said. The picture one is leaning. A guest near the far end, an older cousin with a burgundy pocket square, cleared his throat. Rings can be reset over time. Serafina seized the opening. Exactly. Lucia's jewelry was handled by professionals for years. The name Lucia passed through the room like a cold draft. Clara's hand tightened on Grace's shoulder, and Vittorio saw that too. He did not ask Clara yet. He only let the name sit there. Isabella lowered her lashes, wearing grief like a veil. It was restored, she said quietly. I did not want to speak of it tonight. Some memories are private. It was a good answer. Sad, dignified, difficult to challenge without looking cruel. Vittorio almost nodded. Then Grace said, But you said you never saw the picture. Isabella's eyes moved to her. Just once. Too sharp. The smile came back a half-second late. I meant I had not seen that particular copy, sweetheart. The correction was small. It was also the first change in her story. Vittorio leaned back. His thumb brushed the Caruso signet ring. Across the room, near the service hallway, a young waiter whispered to another that Mr. Romano De Luca was already downstairs by the private elevator. Signed in at 6:12 even though jewelers were not on the guest list until after dinner. Serafina turned her head so quickly one pearl earring struck her neck. Vittorio heard the tiny click. So did Grace. She hugged the photograph again and looked at Isabella's ring, then at the door to the private elevator. For the first time, the little dent in the picture no longer looked like a child's imagination. It looked like the one flaw someone had forgotten to copy. Vittorio did not turn toward the waiter who had spoken. He did not need to. The people in the room had already heard enough to make the air brittle. Romano De Luca downstairs before dessert, before the toast, before anyone had supposedly needed a jeweler, was not proof of anything by itself. In families like Caruso, important men often appeared before being called. Still, Isabella's hand had closed too quickly, Serafina's head had turned too sharply, and Grace's little pencil circle had pointed to the one flaw no one else wanted named. Vittorio lifted one finger, and the nearest guard stepped back instead of forward. That small reversal unsettled the room more than an order would have. No one touches the child, Vittorio said. No one touches the photograph. Serafina's smile remained, but her voice cooled. Vittorio, we are letting a 4-year-old delay a family recognition in front of elders who flew in from 3 states. Then they can wait 4 more minutes, he said. He reached for the nearest candle, a short white pillar in a crystal holder, and slid it closer to the photograph. The flame bent when it moved, throwing a trembling gold line across the old ring in the picture. Vittorio looked at Isabella. Give me your hand. Isabella gave a soft breath, almost a laugh. For a candle trick? For a shadow. That answer made the table quiet. Not because it was loud, but because it was simple. Too simple to refuse without making refusal look like fear. Isabella extended her hand over the tablecloth. The diamond caught the chandelier and broke it into clean little sparks. It was beautiful. It was too beautiful. Vittorio angled the candle so the light passed through the stone. On the white linen beneath her fingers, the shadow fell smooth, round, almost perfect. Grace leaned forward, still standing beside Clara. Her small fist closed around the corner of the photograph. Her eyes narrowed with the seriousness of a child comparing two drawings. "No bite," she said. A few guests shifted. Someone at the far end murmured that old stones cast strange shadows. A lawyer with silver glasses cleared his throat and said, carefully, "Mr. Caruso, with respect, gemstone shadows are not conclusive identification." Serafina nodded at once, grateful for language that sounded official. "Exactly. We cannot humiliate Miss Vane over candlelight and a child's drawing." Humiliate. The word hung there polished and false. Clara stared at the floor as if the word had been aimed at her instead. Grace looked up at her mother, then back at Vittorio. "I'm not trying to make her sad," she said. "I just don't see the moon." Isabella's mouth softened. "Sweetheart, sometimes things look different when they are cleaned. Grown-ups understand that." "Then why did you put your thumb on the inside?" Grace asked. The silence after that was sharper than any accusation. Isabella's thumb was there again, resting across the inner band, graceful as a swan folding its neck. She moved it away slowly. "A nervous habit," she said. "Tonight matters to me." Vittorio watched her hand, then looked toward his consigliere, who stood near the wine cabinet with his phone low against his palm. Vittorio did not speak the order. He only rotated his Caruso signet ring once, twice, 3 times. The consigliere's eyes dipped in acknowledgement. Then he stepped toward the service corridor as if checking a staffing issue. Serafina saw the gesture. She covered her reaction by lifting her water glass, but the rim tapped once against her teeth. A tiny sound. Grace heard it and glanced at her. "The lady with pearls is scared too," Grace whispered. Clara's face went pale. "Grace." Serafina set the glass down. "This is enough. Clara, take your daughter to the kitchen. She is tired." The words were polite. The meaning was not. Clara started to move because years of service had trained her body faster than dignity could answer. But Grace planted both feet beside the dessert cart. Her Mary Janes squeaked softly on the marble. She did not cry. She only held the photograph tighter and said, "Mama said old things still matter." Vittorio's eyes shifted to Clara then. Something in that sentence reached him, though not gently. He saw the worn cuffs, the lowered head, the way the room expected her to apologize for existing near its secrets. "Mrs. Whittaker stays," he said. "Her daughter stays." For the first time, Isabella's face lost its softness for half a second. Then her smile returned. "Of course," she said. "Let us all be generous." Beneath the table, hidden by linen, her other hand moved. Grace saw the little glow before anyone else did. A phone screen, bright and quick, under Isabella's napkin. One thumb typed 3 short words before the screen went dark. Grace could not read fast, but she knew the first letter was big and tall like the one on Romano's name card near the hallway list. At the same moment, Vittorio's consigliere reappeared at the edge of the room. He did not come all the way in. He only looked at Vittorio and gave a single nod. On the security monitor by the service station, frozen in gray light, Romano De Luca stood outside the private elevator 28 minutes before the toast, placing a small velvet box into Isabella Vane's waiting hand. The gray image on the service monitor did not accuse anyone out loud. It simply held still. Romano De Luca, neat coat, silver hair, one gloved hand extended. Isabella Vane, half turned away from the camera, receiving a small velvet box 28 minutes before a toast she had claimed was sacred tradition. For a few seconds, no one in the glass room moved. The candle beside the photograph burned lower, pooling wax against its crystal holder. Vittorio looked at the monitor, then at Isabella's hand. The ring on her finger seemed brighter now, not more beautiful, just louder. Romano was brought up through the private elevator by 2 guards who did not touch him, only walked close enough to make escape look embarrassing. He entered with the wounded dignity of a man used to rich families blaming craftsmen for their own secrets. "Mr. Caruso," he said, bowing his head slightly. I was asked to be available in case the setting needed adjustment after the formal blessing. Isabella's face softened with relief, as if his answer had arrived exactly where she needed it. There, she said quietly. A precaution. Nothing more. Serafina folded her hands. You see? Families like ours prepare for every detail. Grace listened from beside Clara, still holding the old photograph flat against her chest so no one could fold it smaller. She did not understand why the grown-ups used so many soft words for hiding things. Adjustment. Precaution. Detail. She only knew that when Romano looked at the ring, he looked first at Isabella, not Vittorio. Vittorio saw it too. He did not raise his voice. Who ordered the piece? Romano blinked. The piece. Do not make me ask twice. A lawyer at the edge of the room opened a slim tablet. The consigliere placed a printed page on the table, fresh from the office printer, still curling at the edges. It was an invoice from De Luca Fine Jewelry, dated 3 weeks earlier. New platinum setting, pear-shaped center stone, artificial aging, inner engraving, rush delivery. The words looked small on paper, but they pressed the whole room down. Clara stared at the phrase artificial aging as though it were a language she almost understood. Grace leaned toward her mother and whispered, "That means they made it look old?" Clara's lips parted, but no answer came. Vittorio took the invoice with 2 fingers, careful not to smear it. "Photograph it," he said to the lawyer. "Then bag the original. Chain of custody starts now." The lawyer nodded immediately and slid a clear evidence sleeve from his case. That was when the room understood Vittorio was no longer treating this as an awkward family moment. He was treating it as something that might need to survive court. Isabella let out a quiet, wounded breath. "Vittorio, please. I had a copy made because the original is fragile. You know how people are. Cameras, thieves, gossip. I wanted tonight to be perfect, not dangerous." It was the kind of answer that could save a guilty person because it sounded like the answer of an innocent one. Romano seized it. "A ceremonial replica," he said. "Common among old families." Miss Vane requested discretion. "Yes, but discretion is not a crime." Serafina turned toward the elders with gentle authority. And now a child's misunderstanding has turned a protective measure into a public humiliation. Grace lowered her eyes at the word child, but she did not step back. She slid the photograph onto the table again, next to the invoice, then pointed to the drawn pencil circle near the bitten moon. "If it was a copy," she said, "why didn't he copy the hurt part?" Romano's mouth opened. Nothing came out for half a second. Not long. Long enough. Vittorio watched that silence settle into the invoice like ink. Then his lawyer, still scrolling through the file pulled from the private office, stopped on a page and frowned. "Mr. Caruso," he said carefully, "there is another document attached to the recognition packet." Vittorio did not look away from Isabella. "Read the line that made you stop." The lawyer swallowed. "Recognition must occur before midnight for transfer to activate." The words did not reveal everything. They did something worse. They gave the fake ring a deadline. Vittorio's hand closed slowly around the stem of his untouched glass, and for the first time that night, his eyes moved from the ring to the woman he had agreed to marry, as if she had become a stranger wearing a familiar face. The line turned the room colder than the glass walls. Recognition must occur before midnight for transfer to activate. At first, no one spoke because the sentence sounded like law, and law had a way of making greed look clean. Vittorio kept his eyes on Isabella, but he did not ask her what it meant. Not yet. Guilty person could rehearse innocence. Paper could not. He held out his hand, and the lawyer placed the recognition packet in it page by page, each sheet sliding over the tablecloth with a dry whisper. The candles kept burning. Somewhere behind the service doors, a spoon touched the side of a glass. One small ordinary sound trying to live inside a room that had stopped being ordinary. Grace heard it and looked toward the kitchen, where people like her mother usually disappeared when powerful families began using careful voices. She leaned against Clara's skirt and whispered, "Mama, are we in trouble?" Clara did not answer. Her face had changed at the name printed on the packet. Lucia Moretti. It was there in black ink, typed again and again beside phrases Grace could not read. Surviving interest, family recognition, harbor voting rights, marital acknowledgement. Vittorio read slowly. The Moretti harbor rights were not sentimental. They controlled warehouses, shipping contracts, customs routes, and 3 pieces of waterfront property men had killed reputations to get near. If Isabella was recognized as Lucia Moretti under a restored legal identity, and if Vittorio confirmed that recognition before midnight, the transfer would begin before anyone outside the room could challenge it. Isabella lowered her voice. Vittorio, this was always going to be explained after the blessing. Serafina thought it would be less painful for everyone if the family accepted me first. Accepted you as what? He asked. Isabella looked hurt. As the woman who survived what happened. The answer was quiet, beautifully placed, almost convincing. Then a silver tray slipped from Clara's hand. It did not crash. She caught it against her hip at the last second, but the spoons scattered across the linen station with a soft metallic spill. Everyone turned. Clara's eyes were fixed on the document. Not on Isabella. Not on Vittorio. On the line beneath Lucia Moretti's death record. Witness present. Clara Whitaker. Grace reached for her mother's hand with both of hers. Manga. Serafina moved first. This is unnecessary, she said. Mrs. Whitaker was a junior staff member years ago. She signed. Routine paperwork. She likely doesn't even remember. Clara's throat worked once. Twice. I remember. The words were small, but they made Vittorio close the file. He looked at his lawyer. Private alcove. Recorded statement. Independent counsel present. Mrs. Whitaker is not to be questioned by anyone tied to this packet. Serafina's smile held, but her eyes sharpened. You are treating a server like a hostile witness against your future wife. Vittorio turned his signet ring once. No. I am treating her like someone your side keeps trying to speak over. The lawyer guided Clara toward the small wine alcove behind a glass partition, where the lights were dim and the shelves rose in dark wooden rows. Grace followed, clutching the old photograph, but stopped at the threshold and looked back at the table. I don't want Mr. Caruso's money, she said suddenly, because she had heard enough grown-ups talk about transfers to think money was the reason they were angry. I just don't want Mama to be scared. That was the first sentence all night that made Vittorio look away. In the alcove, rain began ticking softly against the glass ceiling, a thin summer rain that blurred the city lights above the restaurant. Clara sat with both hands folded so tightly her knuckles whitened. The lawyer started the recorder. Vittorio stood outside the glass, close enough to see, far enough to let the statement belong to the law and not to him. Clara said she had been pregnant when Lucia died. She said Serafina brought papers to the staff entrance after the chapel fire. She said she was told to sign as witness to Lucia's personal effects or lose her job, her room, and any chance of keeping her baby safe. Then she said the sentence that made Vittorio's face go still. The ring was not on Lucia's hand that night. It was sealed in a paper envelope before they took her away. The lawyer stopped writing for half a second. Vittorio remembered Serafina standing beside him at the funeral, telling him grief made details unreliable. He remembered Isabella months later touching his sleeve and saying some losses deserved to be restored. He remembered Clara passing him in hallways with lowered eyes, invisible because everyone had taught him not to look down. And in that quiet, with rain tapping above him and Grace holding the photograph like a small shield, Vittorio understood he had not been fooled by a stranger first. He had been trained by his own family to ignore the one woman in the room who had seen the truth. Vittorio did not move for several seconds after Clara finished speaking. Outside the alcove, the party pretended to breathe again. Silverware resumed its delicate sounds, chairs shifted, a waiter poured water no one touched, and the elders at the long table sat beneath the chandeliers like carved figures waiting for permission to become real. Isabella remained at the center of it all, her hand folded over the ring, her face arranged into patient sorrow. Serafina stood close enough to look protective, far enough to look uninvolved. That was the art of her kind of power. Vittorio stepped into the alcove and looked at Clara, not as a maid, not as an interruption, but as a person whose silence had been purchased before anyone had called it loyalty. "Mrs. Whitaker," he said. "Where did Grace find the photograph?" Clara swallowed. "In my sewing tin, under old ribbon." Grace lifted her small wrist, where the faded ribbon was still tied. "The blue one was on top," she said. "The picture was under it because Mama didn't want it bent more." Her voice stayed small, but it did not shake. Vittorio nodded once, as if that detail mattered as much as any contract. "And the envelope?" he asked Clara. "Do you remember anything on it?" Clara closed her eyes. "Brown paper, red wax, a number written in black. M7, I think. Or M17. I was crying. I was trying not to be." Vittorio turned to his consigliere. "Archive fault. Personal effects after the chapel fire. Look for Moretti, wax seal, M7 or M17. Bring the notary to the hall, but do not open anything without him." The consigliere left with his phone low in his palm, calm enough to frighten anyone who understood calm men. Vittorio then did something Isabella did not expect. He returned to the table. He did not accuse her. He did not cancel the toast. He lifted his untouched glass and said, "We will continue in 5 minutes." Relief moved across Isabella's face so quickly she almost hid it. Serafina leaned toward her and murmured something too soft for the room. Vittorio watched Grace instead. Grace was looking at Serafina's mouth, not because she understood secret plans, but because children watched faces when adults forgot they were there. "She said the name," Grace whispered. Clara bent down. "What name, baby?" Grace looked uncertain, then pointed very slightly with the photograph. "Mine." Vittorio's eyes shifted. "Serafina has not been introduced to your daughter," he said. Clara's face drained of color. At that exact moment, Serafina turned from Isabella and called, sweetly, "Grace, darling, perhaps you and your mother would be more comfortable in the kitchen." The room did not notice at first. Vittorio did. So did Clara. So did Isabella, whose hand paused on the stem of her water glass. Grace blinked. "How does she know me?" she asked. No one answered. A phone vibrated against the table near Serafina's place setting. Once, twice. No one reached for it. Vittorio looked at it, then at Serafina. "You may read it aloud," he said. Serafina smiled. "It is private family business." "Then it can wait," Vittorio said. His lawyer, standing behind him, received the mirrored download from the internal security system. The file opened slowly, the progress circle turning on the screen like a small white clock. Camera clips. Elevator log. Romano at 6:12. Isabella at 6:14. Serafina's number in the message record at 6:15. The lawyer's face did not change, but he turned the screen toward Vittorio. One message sat there, recovered from the restaurant network backup before anyone could delete it. He only needs to say the name once. Vittorio did not look angry. That was worse. He set his glass down and placed the old photograph beside it, close enough for Grace to reach, far enough that no one else could take it. "Mrs. Bellandy," he said almost gently, "when the notary arrives, you will explain why a child you claim does not belong in this room was important enough for you to know by name." Serafina's smile finally lost its shape, and across the glass hallway, the consigliere appeared carrying a sealed brown envelope marked M17. The sealed brown envelope looked too small to hold a dead woman's name, a stolen inheritance, and the fear that had kept Clara Whitaker silent for years. Yet when the consigliere placed it on the white tablecloth, every powerful person in Il Vetro Nero leaned back as if the paper itself had drawn a knife. The red wax seal was cracked only at the edge, old but unbroken, stamped with the Moretti mark and the inventory number M17 in black ink. The notary arrived from the private hall with his coat still damp from the rain, opened his ledger, and checked the seal under a narrow lamp. "For the record," he said, voice flat and professional, "this envelope has not been opened since archival intake." Isabella's face did not change, but her hand slid off the ring and into her lap. Grace saw it. She pressed closer to Clara, still holding the old photograph, and whispered, That's the color Mama said. Vittorio heard her. He nodded to the notary. Open it here. Serafina's voice entered the room like silk over broken glass. Vittorio, this is grotesque. Lucia's effects should not be handled in front of waiters and children. Vittorio did not look at her. Lucia's name was almost used in front of waiters and children. The notary cut the seal with a small silver blade. No one coughed. No one lifted a glass. Even the service staff in the doorway had gone still, trays balanced in both hands, watching the kind of truth they were usually told to leave the room before hearing. Inside the envelope was a folded inventory slip, a narrow strip of old tissue, and a ring. It did not sparkle like Isabella's. It carried age in its metal, not dirt, not neglect, but the dull softness of something touched by real years. The stone leaned slightly left. On the edge near the setting sat a tiny dark crescent. The bitten moon Grace had drawn around with pencil because she had been afraid it would disappear. Vittorio stared at it and, for the first time that night, could not speak. His face did not collapse. Men like him did not give rooms that much of themselves. But the color left him slowly, and his hand rested on the back of a chair as if the floor had shifted beneath the restaurant his own family owned. Grace lifted the photograph with both hands. That one, she said softly. That's the tired ring. The notary placed the real ring beside the photograph, then beside Isabella's bright copy. 3 objects. 1 truth. The old picture, the sealed ring, the new imitation. The difference did not need shouting. It sat there, clear enough for the elders, the staff, the lawyers, and every polished liar in the room to see. Romano De Luca looked down first. Vittorio turned to him. Your signature is on the invoice. Romano swallowed. I was told the original was lost. By whom? Romano's eyes moved, unwillingly, to Serafina. Serafina did not blink. Isabella did. The lawyer slid the tablet forward, showing the recovered message, the elevator footage, the timestamp, the velvet box, the invoice for artificial aging, the recognition clause before midnight. Vittorio looked at Isabella then, and the pain in his eyes was colder than anger. He was not only seeing the woman who had lied to him. He was seeing the table he had built, the traditions he had protected, the staff he had overlooked, and the child he had almost allowed to be dragged back to the kitchen for telling the truth. Isabella finally spoke very quietly. I did this for stability. Vittorio picked up the false ring with a napkin, held it beside Lucia's, and set it down again without letting the metal touch his skin. If you were Lucia, he said, you would not need a jeweler to copy her wound. Serafina turned toward Clara, her mask cracking just enough for the old threat to show through. You should have stayed grateful. Clara flinched, but Grace stepped in front of her mother's skirt. Not brave like an adult, just loyal like a child. Don't talk to my mama like she's little, she said. Vittorio looked at his attorney and removed his hand from the chair. His voice came out calm, almost gentle. Freeze the transfer. Preserve every file. No one leaves until their statement is recorded. No one moved when Vittorio gave the order. Not because the guards blocked the exits, though they did. Not because his voice had risen, because it had not. They stayed still because the room finally understood that power had changed hands without a shout. The notary marked the time before midnight and wrote, in careful black ink, that the recognition had not been completed and the Moretti transfer could not activate. Vittorio's attorney photographed the real ring, the false ring, the old photograph, the invoice, the recovered message, and the recognition packet on the same white tablecloth where Grace had first been told she did not belong. Each item went into a separate evidence sleeve. The sealed envelope was logged again. The video files were copied to 2 drives. Romano signed a preliminary statement with shaking hands, admitting he had made the imitation under Serafina's instructions and delivered it to Isabella before the toast. Isabella did not cry. She sat very straight, her perfect face emptied of warmth, while the attorney informed her that the engagement was void, the transfer frozen, and the matter would be referred to outside counsel, the Port Authority's legal division, and law enforcement for identity fraud, forged supporting evidence, and attempted transfer of family assets. Serafina tried once to speak as if she still owned the room. Vittorio, family business should remain inside family walls. Vittorio looked at the line of servers standing near the service doors, then at Clara, whose hands were still clasped around Grace's shoulders. That sentence is how this family became rotten, he said. Serafina's title, her office, and her authority over marriage contracts were revoked before the elders, not whispered about later. Romano's work for all Caruso properties was terminated pending litigation. Isabella was escorted out through the front corridor, not the kitchen hall, because Vittorio would not let the staff be used as the path for other people's shame. Then he turned to Clara. For the first time all night, the room saw a Mafia boss hesitate. He did not know how to apologize in a way that repaired years. He only knew how to begin. "Mrs. Whitaker," he said, "you were threatened under my roof, silenced under my name, and tonight almost punished for raising a child honest enough to say what grown people hid. I am sorry." The words did not fix the old fear in Clara's body, but they gave it somewhere to stand. Her statement was recorded again with independent counsel present. A staff protection policy was drafted before dawn. No employee could be punished for reporting fraud, coercion, forged documents, or threats. Every report would go directly to outside legal review, not through family intermediaries. Clara was moved out of staff housing that same week and into a safe apartment paid through a restitution fund, not charity. Her wages were corrected with back pay for unpaid overtime, and she was made staff liaison for Il Vetro Nero, with a salary, legal support, and the authority to bring worker concerns straight to council. Grace was not photographed for newspapers. She was not pushed in front of cameras. Her words were taken by a child advocate in a quiet room with crayons on the table and Clara beside her, and all she had to explain was the picture, the ring, and the bitten moon. Later, after the guests had gone and the glass room had been cleared, Vittorio placed Lucia Moretti's real ring back into a new sealed case beside the old photograph. Not hidden in a vault this time, but displayed in a small memorial cabinet near the front of Il Vetro Nero, where staff and family entered through the same light. Grace stood on tiptoe to see it. "Does it still hurt?" she asked. Vittorio looked at the little crescent in the stone, then at Clara standing upright in the room that had once made her lower her eyes. "No," he said softly. Someone finally listened. Grace nodded as if that made perfect sense, then slipped her small hand into her mother's, and for the first time that night, the smallest voice in the room did not have to fight to be heard.